Hey guys, I'm just relaxing here in the garden, having a good time. And I had this little idea. I'm going to start doing a video, probably once a month, of things that I'm doing in the garden that I can improve on, things that are going really well, and just any general thoughts. So these videos will be like a journal video form that I can look back on and see how far I've come. So let's have a little look around and see how things are going. So here it is, the garden. It looks a little bit chaotic at the moment, and that's because it is. I'm sort of just experimenting, observing, seeing how things grow. And I found that doing for me, so getting out here is the best way to learn. I've read heaps of books, watched heaps of videos, but for me, getting out here and seeing how things work visually is the best way for me to learn. So let's have a look at some of the biggest mistakes I've made so far, and there's quite a few of them. Okay, so mistake number one is, first of all, look at these tomatoes. That is just gorgeous. Anyway, first mistake I made was putting too much mulch on the garden that wasn't aged enough. And when I say aged, I mean broken down. So the mulch that I put on here was fresh mulch. It had just been mulched. And I put probably about 8 or 9 inches onto the soil, so quite a lot. And the problem with that is to plant anything into it, I had to dig quite a deep hole to plant and find the soil. So if we look down now, it has broken down. It's been quite a few months since I put the mulch down, and you can get a handful of it. There's lots of nutgrass. It's the worst weed ever. You get a handful of it. And one way to tell if soil is good, if you squeeze it and it holds its shape like that, so it's not falling apart, but when you try and break it apart, it just crumbles. There's lots of nutgrass. That's the best way to tell the soil structure, if it's good. So the soil is very, very high in humus, and humus is basically pure organic matter. So I'm not sure, I'll put the number up, but humus can hold many times over its weight with water. So basically you have to water less. So it's an investment. So the more organic matter you put onto your soil, mulch, the less you have to water. So the less time you are actually in the garden working. So it's really good. But I put way too much mulch on, and that made things really difficult. So if I was to do it again, I would definitely put less mulch on the garden, and if I did put a lot on, I would make sure it was well broken down, and yeah, just do little bits at a time. Okay, mistake number 2, not using trellises on plants early enough. So this is a tomato here. As you can see, it's very, I don't even know the word for it, chaotic. It's a whole bush. The problem with this tomato is I let it grow quite tall and sort of put off putting a trellis up. I procrastinated a little bit, but looking at it now, I really wish that I trellised it on one of these. This is like a little tripod structure that I just tied it onto. And it made it very difficult because once the branches got really long, I had to weave it through here and they snapped, and yeah, it wasn't great. So if I was to do this again, I would definitely install one of these a lot earlier and really get on top of making sure the plants can grow nice and tall and get lots of sunlight. And yes, please learn from my mistakes. Okay, mistake number 3, not putting plants where they should be. So this is sweet potato. It looks beautiful. It covers the ground, which is really good. So it stops all of the water evaporating. So it is really good. And the sweet potatoes actually break up the soil. The soil's quite clay here. So it breaks it apart and gets more air into the soil. The problem though is that it takes up quite a lot of space. So it's a ground cover. And that means that I can't grow anything else here. So because this garden bed here is the closest to where we walk, it's better to have plants here that you check on and pick very frequently. And then you want to have plants like sweet potato, which you don't pick as often. I believe it's every 3 to 6 months. I could be very wrong, but you do those further away from where you walk. So most intensive plants, least intensive plants. And I put this here because I just got really excited. I went to Bunnings and I saw that and I'm like, I want that. And planted it, and it was only like, when I first got it, it was like literally that big, this shoot in a little pot. And I thought, oh, it'll be fine. And then this happened. So I'll have to remove that soon. But yes, choose your location of your plants wisely and consider where you're walking from and how that affects where you plant them. Okay, mistake number 3, not planting in rows. So this garden bed here was the first one that I started in. And I had this great idea, well, I thought it was great at the time, of planting seedlings in different spots randomly. So, you know, a tomato there, a dill plant there, another tomato plant over there, some coriander there. And my thought process was it would be the same as nature, you know, having plants growing in random spots. The problem with that though is that I can't find anything. So if I want to get some tomatoes, I've got to, you know, find where the tomatoes are. And if I want to water the plant as well, I'm actually not too sure where the bottom of the plant is. Like, I've got to dig through all of that. So I wish that I did it in rows. So for this, you know, this coriander here as an example, I wish I had a row of coriander. This flower here, I'm not too sure what variety it is. It looks like this one. Well, it's the same one. Very beautiful. The bees love it. But I wish I did those in rows. This dill, which is also flowering, in rows. And it made it a bit difficult to fertilize the plants and to pick them. So this garden bed here was my second attempt at that, and I did exactly that. I did rows. And that made things a lot easier. So yes, mistake number 3. Okay, mistake number 4. As you can see here, there are quite a lot of weeds growing. There's some tomatoes popping up, some very sad basil. One of the problems here is that I did not plant seedlings in gaps. So right here, there's a gap, and wherever there's a gap, weeds come through. That's just how they work. So weeds aren't actually a bad thing, as a lot of people think they are. Weeds protect the soil, they stop evaporation, they feed the microbes with their roots, and it's basically like putting a band-aid on the soil. It protects it. So weeds aren't bad. The only problem though is that they stop the plants that you want to grow from growing. So what I wish I did instead was found the gaps and planted something that I wanted as soon as possible. So if I wanted a tomato, I planted it there, which would have stopped all that stuff from growing. So that happened all throughout here. I had a lot of gaps, which I've started to fill it in. So here was a big gap, and I filled it with coriander, and now there's no weeds because the plants are there. Some more coriander there. Okay, so I've talked about some things that I've done badly in the garden. Let's talk about some things that I've done well, that I'm happy with. The first thing is letting some plants go to flower. So this was a cauliflower. You can see it sort of in the middle there. And I accidentally let it go to flower. But if you look closely, there's bees all over it. The little black ones, they're native Australian bees, and the big ones are the European bees. And this has just brought in so many bees into the garden, which pollinate all the other plants. The tomatoes here next to it. This plant is covered. So letting some things go to flower is actually really good because it brings in all of the insects and it lets them pollinate the plant, so you're getting more fruit, and it just looks beautiful. I come down here in the morning and you know, you can hear all the buzzing. It's amazing. This broccoli over here too, it's nearly done flowering. This was covered in bees the other day. And now it's got hundreds, probably thousands of seeds, which I will collect and then plant. Okay, win number 2, planting in rows. Like I was saying before, it's made things a lot easier, helps me see where things are. So we've got lettuce, carrot, some dahlias, onions, snow peas, and it's just really easy to see where everything is. And it also means when I'm watering, so giving the plants some sea salt, I can see the row and I just pour it down. I don't have to guess where they are. So that's made things a lot easier. I'm very happy with that. Okay, win number 3 is planting comfrey on the side of the garden beds. So comfrey is a perennial and it has very big leaves and a very deep root. So comfrey brings up nutrients from deep in the soil and it puts it into its leaves. And what you can do with this plant is pull the leaves off just like that, so they come straight out, and you can use them as mulch on the garden. So I put that straight there. This big leaf here, just pull it straight out, and once again just put it on the soil. That's free mulch right next to the garden. So I can pull that out, and any part that has too many weeds that I don't like this nutgrass, which is the worst weed ever. I think I might have said that before. Sunlight can't get to it, it dies. So it's really good to have right there while I'm planting things. This parsley here, I can just pull a leaf out and plant it around the base of it. So that's been really good. Okay, win number 4, I feel like I'm throwing up gang signs here, has been planting flowers in the garden. So not just letting things go to flower like the broccoli or the cauliflower, but planting things that are going to be flowers, so not to eat. And you can see there's actually a bee that's loving this plant right now. And I think every garden needs flowers. They just make things very beautiful. And they bring in pollinators and they help repel the pests off plants that you don't want to get eaten. So it basically, having flowers in the garden basically mimics a natural grassland or a natural forest. So it makes things how they should be, more natural. Okay, this right here is like a half win. So I'm not sure if this will work, but I built this little bird feeder. It's very high quality, as you can tell, very, very well built. I put some little maize seeds on top for the birds to come and eat. But my goal with this is the birds will hopefully come, eat the seeds, and while they're eating, they poop on the plants here, and their poop, which is full of nitrogen, feeds the plants around here. So I've got some kale seedlings, some celery, which they are both leafy greens. So nitrogen manure is really good for leafy greens because the more nitrogen you get, the more plant growth. So hopefully that works. I'm yet to see any birds on it, but yeah, that's a little experiment. So another thing I want to talk about is goals for the garden. So at the moment, I've only got these 2 raised garden beds. I would love to eventually continue those all the way down here and fill up this whole space. We get really good sunlight here, whereas over here we don't. So I reckon things would grow really well here. I also want to start using this dam water. There's an old pump right there. And the benefit of using dam water is that it's full of nutrients and microbes. So putting that on the garden, you're going to get more growth, and that should be really good. The only problem with having garden beds all the way down here is wood is very expensive. And I do not have that much extra money to spend on garden beds. So I'm thinking about maybe using secondhand wood, or maybe even some tree logs to build the garden beds. And my other goals are to take plants that shouldn't be here, like the sweet potato, and putting them in dedicated raised garden beds. So having a raised garden bed just for potatoes, sweet potatoes, for turmeric, ginger, things that I don't touch as much and things that don't get eaten as often, and just having them in certain spots away from the areas that we visit the most, like these front two areas. So that is the goals at the moment. I will post another video like this in a month and hopefully have a lot more failures and wins. And I appreciate you guys watching. It means a lot. And I believe that the best way to learn is to do. So I also want to encourage you guys to get out there and make mistakes, have some wins, and grow some food. Thanks for watching, guys.